Well, the reason for looking at infrastructure has to do with its high profile in the policy debate in Brazil at the moment. The fact that infrastructure, or rather I should say lack of investment in infrastructure, is one of the key obstacles to accelerated and inclusive growth. So our paper wanted to look at that issue in general, and in particular to try and look at things that might be retarding investment in infrastructure. The paper's got two main components. The first is an econometric component, and what we do there is to look at the links between infrastructure and growth. And what we find is that investment in infrastructure, perhaps unsurprisingly, has a very strong relationship with GDP growth. But investment in particular kinds of infrastructure, especially highway infrastructure, can have a much more positive impact than investment in other kinds of infrastructure. So that's the first thing that the paper does. The second thing that the paper does is to actually look at some of the underlying problems which are preventing growth in infrastructural investment from taking off. And they really centre around two particular issues. First is the availability of finance, the fact that interest rates in Brazil are very high, the fact that the private sector doesn't have very deep pockets, the capital markets are thin. The other issue has to do with the regulatory environment, and this is the idea that although the institutions that govern these infrastructural projects have evolved over recent years, and there is a well-developed regulatory framework, nonetheless it doesn't always operate very efficiently. There are uncertainties surrounding its application, there are overlapping agencies, and all of this creates a rather uncertain investment environment for those that would intend to invest in infrastructure. I think what was perhaps surprising to me was the degree of increase of traffic in urban areas, just the sort of scale of the problems that the authorities are having to deal with. And partly, I guess you could say that is the result of Brazil being a victim of its own success. As other papers that have been produced by IRIBA show, there's been a significant increase in average personal incomes over the last 10 years. And for the first time as a result of that, many people are being drawn into car ownership, or multiple car ownership, and yet the road infrastructure hasn't really expanded to keep pace. And it's the extent of the increasing demand for these sorts of services that's really impressive. And it's in that context that you can understand the difficulties the authorities have in trying to keep up with what is a moving target. I think it's all too easy to sort of look from this remove and say, well, that they're not doing enough. But the challenges that they're facing are really very, very significant. And one of the things I think we highlight in the paper is the extent to which that kind of a challenge, where you have a fast developing economy, you have an emerging middle class, you have an increase in car ownership. These are all features that you can associate with emerging and expanding urban areas in sub-Saharan Africa. Think about the example of Lagos, for example, or even Kampala. These are cities which are well known for their traffic congestion, and yes, attempts also to try to alleviate that through infrastructural investment.